how do I find data center tenants? How to find data center tenants? That's a really interesting question because the tenants implies that you're focusing on running a sales process that is very heavily real estate focused. And we know that so much of the co-location, so much of the operator business model focuses very, very heavily on the intersection of technology, facilities, and real estate. We know there's a whole separate ecosystem in and around data centers and digital infrastructure that is just real estate and real estate investment trusts and all of the capital, the millions, the hundreds of millions, potentially the billions that are needed to grow this industry at the pace to keep up with demand and keep moving forward. But when it comes to finding data center tenants, what that usually tells me is the approach is focusing very heavily on real estate and not so much on technology and not so much on facilities. If you're okay with that, that's fine. But if you intended to focus a little bit more on what your company can do to differentiate itself with its approach to information technology and facilities, you may want to think about whether tenant is really the right word that you refer to in public-facing materials and events and messaging having to do with your future potential tenants versus clients versus partners versus however you want to address this. But years ago, what I would typically hear from DCRE, from data center real estate folks, is they were looking for the magical database that told them when certain agreements like co-location agreements were coming up for renewal, when they were expiring, because they'd want to swoop in there with just the right timing. You know, it's super interesting that we're in this place now where both within the data center industry and the much broader information technology industry, we're in a place where people have firmly recognized that like 90 to 95% of potential clients are not in market right now. What does that mean? They could be from the perfect company. They could be the perfect buyer persona or the second most important buyer persona. And they'll be fantastically interested in exploring the kinds of information and resources and space and data center related locations that you have. But it may be anywhere from a couple of weeks to maybe even several months or more down the road. So it's incredibly important if we want to be relevant to the way that people now research and make their purchase decisions, that we're willing to play the long game. What that means is we need to be very focused at the company level on who the individuals work for. We've defined our ideal client profile or ideal tenant profile in this particular case. So we know both where these properties are located, where these locations are, sites are, but we also know where the tenants would be, where the clients are located in terms of geographic region. And in some cases, you're selling real estate locally to people that are local. In some cases, you're selling nationally and globally. But we need to be crystal clear on the ideal client profile, the ideal tenant profile of their location, their company size. Do you do better with tenants from huge companies, or do you do better with tenants from mid-sized companies or really small startup-y kind of companies? So we need to define that. And then we need to figure out if there's a business model or industry component that's especially well suited for the kind of properties that you're representing and looking for tenants for. Are there certain things that are especially conducive to certain industries or business models, especially depending on regulatory environments in certain geographic areas and certain attributes of the facility that you're looking to fill? So all of this comes into play in defining at a company level who we're looking for. And then we need to know at an individual level who are the stakeholders that are most likely going to be navigating this kind of real estate offering that you're presenting in front of them. And again, a lot of it's the job titles and functions will very heavily depend on the company size you're going after, how specialized versus more generalized particular roles and functions, and who's on a typical decision committee. But we need clarity at a company level who we're looking for. From there, we should be able to back into a target list of people that we need to get in front of. And then we need to understand, depending on the property that you're representing, depending on what's unique about it, how big it is, how small it is, the kinds of ideal tenants that you're looking for. We need to understand what makes the individual, who the individuals would be that we need to build relationships with, and what their priorities are, what their biggest goals are, what they're struggling with, what they're frustrated the most with. And then we need to figure out a way to show up as early as possible so that we're with them throughout this full journey. It's a misnomer, a huge mistake to think that you only want to talk with people that are ready for, that are in market, that are ready for sales contact. Because if you wait until they're at the 95% or point or 90% point or even 83% point, if you look at the data center industry on a much more macro level of like how Gartner's defined how B2B kind of purchase decisions are made. If you wait till your prospects, if you wait till your potential tenants are that far along, someone else or some other companies have been spending a lot of time with those potential tenants, educating and building trust with them, helping them figure out what to look for, what the criteria is that they're going to use to judge what facilities they're ultimately going to put on their short list. So in other words, if you don't get in there early, if you don't get in there often, you will more than likely have to settle for that tenant, that prospective tenant's definition of what they're looking for based on likely a competitor or indirect competitor of yours being the one that stacked the decks in their particular favor. So if you want to be the one that's stacking the decks in your company's particular favor, you need to take the long game and get in there as early as possible. So you're seen as a lot more than just real estate. So you're seen as the go-to expert, subject matter expert, teachers, consultants, trusted advisors on anything and everything having to do with digital infrastructure in this particular market for this kind of company, for this kind of potential tenants. So that's really the key to all of this. For sure, if you're able to build up lists of people in competing properties in the local area and target them more specifically, more power to you, but on a much more macro level, a lot of it is defining geographically. Obviously, where your site is going to be, where the data center is located, whether you're looking to just target locally, whether you're looking to target nationally, whether you're looking to target globally, and then the size of tenant, the size of company that's a really good fit. Think Goldilocks, what's too big, what's too small, and then are there certain industries? Once you have those 3 or 4 parameters defined, you can go about building a list of potential tenants. And then you need to go about building awareness and educating and building trust with those tenants so they see you as the go-to advisor and not just focused on the real estate transaction. Because there are some people that can still win just based on the real estate transaction. And depending on your company size, if you have the brand of like JLL or CBRE behind you or something like that, you can play this a little differently than someone that has a much lesser known brand nationally and globally. But if you're somewhere in the middle, yeah, for sure, it behooves you for your real estate professionals, for your sales team to get very heavily involved in building their personal brands, building their team's brand, building their company's brand up in the space so that they're seen as go-to experts. And that's how you will find tenants. That's how you will get tenants that will come to you as opposed to you having to chase them because you've taken the time to play the long game. And you recognize that the way people research and make decisions around data center real estate is very, very different today than how it was as recently as 10 years ago.